with what's going on in the world, particularly the Palestinian-Israeli crisis and the atrocities that are taking place, it can be really tricky for people to show up in their regular life and feel like any of it matters when things like that are going on. In this world where we live, these are really happening, and that can be really a hard shift for people to have, because it can feel really awful to be participating in quote unquote normal life while things like that are happening. So I just wanted to, number one, validate you if you are feeling a little bit of that chaos or that confusion around it, and let you know that if you are finding a space to speak about it, finding a place to take action on it, that is amazing. And also finding a space emotionally to process the fact that things like that are possible in the world that you live in, where you go to work and you talk about, how to get protein on the internet, and then also this stuff is happening. It's okay if that's really confusing for you. If you are experiencing emotional overwhelm right now, or a lot of stress, or with what's going on in the world, you're just feeling out of sorts, and you are finding that you're drifting towards some of your negative coping mechanisms, whether that is binge eating, whether that is substances, drinking a little bit more alcohol, whatever you're doing, I just want to remind you that those methods of coping are to push emotion down, push it down, hide it in the way, way, way back. And I want to encourage you to maybe try something different. I had an incredible call with one of our girls last night, one of our clients, and we went over binge eating, how that can appear, why it can appear, what your body is trying to do, and what it's trying to tell you when you are having those sensations of binge eating. If you are having those feelings come up, those urges come up to go back to those old coping mechanisms, one of the most crucial things that you can do is recognize that you are trying to shut down those emotions and give them air. So one of the things that I mentioned last night on the call was, as crazy as it sounds, talking to yourself a lot about what's going on, allowing yourself to scream or work through what you're processing, what you're burying, and really reach the end of it. Because if you are upset about the way that you're being treated at work and you're realizing, what's going on? Talk to me. Well, everybody just sucks. I hate everybody around me. They need everything from me. I feel like I'm being pulled in every which direction. If you just let yourself vent like you're venting to a friend, usually you can figure out at least the source of that. And that feeling like you're going to explode or implode and you have to do something to shut it down will, at least you'll be pulling on the thread to figure out what's going on. Because a lot of times the binge eating is actually just a way of working through emotion without having to really audibly process it out loud. Your body's trying to protect you. Your body's trying to keep you alive. So it is going to take what you're feeling and smush it down for you. Now, if you can at least start pulling on the thread and following those feelings to get them a little bit more oxygen, a little bit more air, your body will start to recognize not only are you not going to die when those emotions come up, but you are capable at this point in your experience of processing emotion in a different way than maybe you were when you adopted the initial coping mechanism. Your body is going to operate the same way until you allow it to change. So, a couple of things that we can do around that. Number one, start communicating with yourself without judgment around what you're feeling. Allow yourself to bring those feelings up, vocalize them in a safe space where it's just you. There's no judgment. Whatever you're feeling is allowed. Really vent like you're talking to a friend. And also, your body is not going to shift into a different coping mechanism that is any healthier than the current coping mechanism if you haven't come up with other coping mechanisms. It doesn't mean that you just decide you're not going to binge anymore and suddenly you're healed and there's never going to be an issue that comes up. Instead, what's going to happen is you're going to choose an equally toxic, if not more toxic, coping mechanism if you haven't figured out any positive coping mechanisms, or you haven't figured out any positive ways to work through emotion. So really do your due diligence in between those moments of panic, in the calm that happens in between those stages. Think about other coping mechanisms or other ways that you could work through emotion and process those emotions before you have another attack, if you will. Not only in that gap between attacks or between episodes do you want to be thinking about alternative coping mechanisms and ways that you could process emotions and move through them when they get really, really big, but you also want to do something that I call letting the air out of the tire, meaning that no matter whether the week was good or bad, things happened during that week that disrupted your flow and messed with your nervous system and made you anxious, even if it was traffic in the morning and things you didn't even notice were happening, you are progressively getting more and more overwhelmed if you are somebody who is not taking time to work through those things in your nervous system and just create a sense of calm. So one of the things that you can do is in between episodes, still do what's called letting air out of the tire. So as the week progresses, whether it's good or bad, you're still doing things that are a form of self-care, that are a form of connecting with yourself, to allow yourself to get back to that zero, get back to that sense of calm or peace in between, so that you're less likely to end up in those really, really big feelings as frequently. You want to create a space where the small feelings adding up also have room to move through instead of just only being packed down. Because with binge eating, especially when you pack all those emotions down, that's what's happening is you've got so many emotions, and then a binge eating episode almost lets you lay cement over top of them. Like, you're not processing anything when you're binge eating. If anything, you are seeking that numb and that calm that comes from an episode. So when you are doing that, you're just taking absolutely everything from your week or your month or whatever and packing it into your body instead of processing at least the small things, because those big episodes, those big explosions are far less frequent if you are processing the small stuff that can create the explosion. Because it's rare, if you're having a binge eating episode, you rarely can pinpoint a huge moment that caused you to explode. It's usually small.